I am a frequent Redditor, and while surfing No Sleep, I found a post called "The Man with No Face." In brackets, she is mine. Later I stumbled upon a post from a different person called "The Man Without a Face." I figured that it was the same guy on a different account, however their writing styles are too different. The first is well thought out and much more specific, while the second one seemed to have been written faster and without any thought of pursuing the creature in the story. I didn't find any activity from the newer post that they knew the first post. The user didn't even comment on the "She is mine" post until after his was up, and he was linked through the comments of his by someone who has read both stories. Here are the two stories in their order of appearance. The first post. Felt like I needed to add that this is all true and happening to my family as you read this. This is longer than most like to read, but I feel like I need to tell some people who would believe me. I have a wife and an 11-year-old daughter, and we now live in southern Missouri. We have never had any kind of ghost hauntings, poltergeist sightings, or anything of the sort. We have a kitten we got not long after the first incident happened, but no dogs or anything that is supposed to see things. All that I tell you is from my family, believe it or not. Being that it is an ongoing police investigation, we can't release any details from the local sheriff's office, and there was no media attention given at our request. I wrote this in the form of a short story, being that I am a writer, and want you to feel more like you are experiencing it rather than me just telling you. Lily had just recently started to act irrational. She was never like this before, always a good kid with good grades and attitude towards others. But recently she had started to go downhill into a spiral of depression and sudden outbursts of anger. She was only 11, but it was looking like she was going through a mental breakdown due to stress or some other unseen factor. It had really started to get noticed after we moved from California to southern Missouri. She obviously didn't want to leave her friends, but everything up until the initial move was normal. After we got settled in, she seemed to be adjusting fine with a new friend just a mile away. She started to get off the bus at her house only to have Melissa's mother drop her off before dinner. Mel and Lily seemed to hit it off great, instantly becoming best friends. But recently, they stopped seeing each other. Lily had been getting off the bus at our house and going straight to her room and sitting on her bed and listen to music. It started to scare me. She was acting like a rebellious teenager, and she wasn't even 13. I tried consulting a few therapists, but none of them seemed to understand what was sending my little girl into this state of grief. They each asked what was the most traumatic thing to happen to her this year, but the move was the only thing I could think of. One even had the audacity to ask if I were abusing her in any way, physically, mentally, or even sexually. I tried getting her to talk, but she wouldn't respond to me. It got worse the day she was sent home from school after bashing a fellow classmate in the face with a book after he tried to touch her. I was fed up of all this not knowing. I unforgettably went off on her, angry about my wife having to leave work early, scared of not knowing what was going on with her, and worried that my little girl may have some kind of mental problem. That night, I talked to my wife Mary about maybe getting her on medication. We had been reluctant about doing so, both of us agreeing that it was the worst case scenario. That was when my world began to crash down upon me. Sitting in the kitchen, discussing the medication, a blood-curdling scream echoed from upstairs. It came from Lily's room and sounded like she was getting murdered. I instantly jumped off of the counter and dashed upstairs. I got to her door to find it locked. I beat on the door screaming at her. My heart stopped the moment I heard what she screamed next. "Get away. Don't touch me." That moment, I stepped back and kicked the door with everything I had, but it barely budged. The solid oak doors of our house had seemed like such a luxury when we moved in. I kicked again. This time the frame cracked. I heard her scream again. "No, get your hands away from me." My adrenaline was pumping, and I mustered up everything I had and kicked again. The door busted open, and the sight I saw sent shivers down my spine. The window was open, and a trail of blood led from the foot of Lily's bed to the open window. Lily was curled up in a ball at the head of her bed, shaking. Her arms had gashes and her bed was streaked with her blood. I ran to the window as my wife ran to check on our daughter. It was then that I realized that her bedroom window faced the back of the house that had a large dip where our basement came out to a concrete basketball court. This made her window easily 3 stories up to a concrete drop with no way to climb up or down. This was why we had to put up a safety bar outside her window in case of her falling out of the open window. The bar was mangled, as if someone had taken the jaws of life to it. The window, aside from being covered in blood, had long gashes all along the bottom and sides as if someone or something clawed the window open and climbed in. A small puddle of blood was on the concrete below, and a trail led off into the woods behind our house. I called the cops and got an ambulance coming. Lily wouldn't talk, only cried into her mother's shirt. After she was taken to the ER, the cops questioned us about what happened. We explained our story and showed them the blood and mangled bar. They questioned us further, making sure we weren't some sick abusive parents. Then sent a few canine units through our woods to scope it out. Nothing was found and, without a word at the hospital, Lily returned some 3 days later with the gashes in her arm stitched up. We had 24-hour cop surveillance for the next week, but nothing happened. They dropped it to only a nightly watch, and soon only checked up randomly through the night. Lily had only spoken when she needed food or water or go to the bathroom. We had started to sleep in the master bedroom with a shotgun, fully loaded, next to my bed. The night Lily finally told me what happened and who was in her room changed my life. Lily was in the living room watching TV with our new kitten we bought to help her over the most recent traumatic events. At this time, she had spoken a few more times, mostly to Buggy, the kitten, and to Melissa when she visited to see how she was doing. I sat down in the chair next to the couch and saw she was watching a documentary about shadow people and ghosts. I snatched the control and leaned close to her. "Baby, can you tell me what happened in your bedroom?" She was hesitant at first and pointed to the television set. I looked up to see that I had paused it on a picture of a shadow man. It had red eyes and was an outline in the shadows of some hallway. It sent chills down my spine. I had never believed in ghosts or supernatural things, but the way her hand shook as she pointed at the TV told me she wasn't lying. "He told me if I said anything, he would hurt you and Mommy." It was the first time I had heard her speak a relatively whole sentence since the bedroom incident. I grabbed her and pulled her close to me. She was crying by now and shaking uncontrollably. I ran my hand down the back of her head to comfort her. "Nothing is going to happen to you, I swear." I tried to reassure her, or me. I wasn't sure anymore. "What did he look like?" She sniffled and pulled herself together enough to explain to me what she saw come through her bedroom window. She first told me he only came to her window and stared in at first. This was the nights she appeared randomly in our room in the morning, sleeping between me and Mary. But one night she awoke to her window open and his face sticking inside. He told her if she moved he would get her. She stayed on her bed, being she was too terrified to move. She said he had a smooth, white, featureless face. His face was almost ivory or porcelain with dark, shadowy eyes. A large black line ran up his left eye and down to the bottom of his chin. He had no mouth or nose, and long, dark black hair ran down the side of his face. He didn't have a body, only a head that seemed to float in the darkness. When he talked, it sounded like whispers all around her. He never did more than stare at her and begged her to let him touch her cheek. She always declined, scared of him. This had been what she saw on a normal basis, causing her dissocial behavior and lack of sleep. She told me one night he came further into the window, sitting on the pane inside of her room, but never going further than that. His body was nothing but shadows that moved like they were alive. She explained that his hands rested upon what looked like his knees from under the shadows. He had large hands, long fingers that ended into what looked like large daggers. His hands were as white as his face, smooth, and even glistening in the moonlight that shone behind him. That was when she told me that the night she was attacked in her room, he had told her if she didn't let him touch her cheek, he would kill me. He told her he would rip me apart in front of her, limb from limb, and if she still wouldn't let him touch her, he would do the same to Mary. She finally broke down and told him he could come in her room and touch her cheek, but begged him not to hurt her. He was instantly beside her, his hands and face hovering above her bed looking down at her. He grabbed her arms. His sharp fingers dug into her arms and drew blood. This was when she started screaming and pleading for him to stop. When she struggled, he dug his fingers deeper and tried to hold her still. She thrashed around, causing his fingers to dig deeper. As she told me this, I looked at her arm. The stitches and marks looked like an oversized Freddy Krueger had done just what she said. The blood drained from my face. Could she possibly be telling me the truth? Or was this some sort of illusion she created up in her mind? But the window, the bar was mangled, and it was 2 inches of steel. No way could she have done that herself. She cried herself to sleep in my arms after her story. I rocked her back and forth. Buggy was curled up asleep in her arms. My wife came and I handed our daughter off to her to take her to the room. I decided to stay awake and do some research and writing on my novel. I must have fallen asleep because I awoke suddenly to a dark living room. My notebook had slipped to the floor and was off. I was a little surprised. Usually Mary would leave the hallway light on for me when I fell asleep in my chair, so I could easily stumble to the stairs into the room. That was when I felt a sudden cold rush and a feeling of dread and despair. It almost made me sick. My stomach twisted and I felt like throwing up. I went to stand up and I suddenly was forced back into the chair. The recliner popped out and I was nearly lying flat. That was when I saw the darkness above me moving like it was liquid. Then, out of the blackness, a face emerged, just as Lily had described. It was featureless, except for 2 sunken eye slots with a large black rectangular cutout along its left eye. Hair then fell down out of the blackness and was inches from my face. 2 large white-clawed hands also emerged out of the living shadow at its side. It was hovering right above me. Some kind of force was holding me down and forcing me to stare into its black eyes. It spoke, but it didn't come from the direction of its face, but from all around me, like multiple people whispering and growling. "She is mine. You will not stop me. I will have her." The force holding me became stronger. I could barely breathe under its weight. Then its hand got closer to me. I could see they were stained with dried blood. Lily's blood. I became furious and spoke for the first time. "Get the fuck out of my house. You won't touch my daughter." Its eyes started to emanate some kind of red haze around them, and the force on me strengthened. I felt like my chest was going to cave in from the weight. My ribs creaked under the force and the face, now only an inch or so from my face, froze. It didn't move. Even the liquid-like shadows he was made of became still. Then, without warning, the face started to lighten up and the form started to back off and float towards the ceiling. The force on me was almost gone when suddenly it came alive again, and the hand shot up towards my face and a deafening roar went all through the house and my head. It came at me, the blood-stained hand coming directly at my face. Then, in an instant, all the lights came on in the house, and my wife stood in the kitchen screaming. I jumped up off the chair and landed on my feet. She had dropped the coffee cup and was frozen in fear, staring directly at me. I went to her and she collapsed into my arms. After a minute, the shock and fear washed over her and she began to settle down. She sat at the bar and explained to me what she saw. Apparently, I had been asleep in the chair while she was making herself a cup of hot chocolate. She said she was heading towards me to wake me up and tell me to go to bed. When I started to convulse and the chair shot back on its own, and I began to hover a few inches off the chair, that was when she screamed and dropped the glass and woke me from the nightmare. I now fully believe my little girl, and have no idea how to stop whatever it is that is haunting us. At the request of my wife, I drew a picture and made audio of what I heard while the thing was attacking me. This has taken place over the last year that we have lived in this house. Ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, priests, and even an exorcist have come and went with no luck. A psychic came in and wouldn't spend more than a few minutes upstairs. We didn't tell her what was going on, but she knew something is here, and it wants one of us. Here's a picture and the mock audio I made to try and recreate what I saw and heard. Keep in mind, this audio was made by me and is not a recording of the creature. Edit. Wow, the turnout I have gotten from you guys is amazing. I appreciate all your kind words and worry for my family. We will get through this one way or another. I hope it's gone, but I doubt it. I still feel like something is there even as I type this. Something happened last night that made this all the more real though. Shortly after posting the story on here, Lily broke down in a panic. I hadn't shown her the drawing or recording because I didn't want to scare her. I had left my laptop on the kitchen table with Reddit and the audio recording up while showering. When I was just about done in the bathroom, I heard a scream and sobs. After everything that had happened, I didn't hesitate to grab a towel and be downstairs in a matter of seconds. She was on the floor against the far wall of the kitchen, crying heavily. My wife was gone for the evening, staying at her sister's due to her just having a baby a few days before. I ran over looking around, expecting to see something or the entity. I knelt down and asked her what was wrong. She told me she listened to the audio recording and looked at the picture. And when she heard the voices, she thought it was back. She asked how I knew what it looked like. Being I hadn't told her it came after me in fear it might worry her more. I finally told her everything after getting dressed and reassured her nothing was going to happen to her. Also, not sure if this is a big deal, but mirrors have come up missing. Not large ones like in the bathroom or anything, but small ones scattered through the house. I came upon a few broken not long ago, and figured Lily had broken them but was too scared to say. It seemed like nothing then, but now that we know something is in the house, I can't help to wonder if it is the one doing this. A post from a different user. When I was a child, about 6, I used to have a recurring hallucination, or at least that's what I was told. I remember it well, and it felt so real. I would agree I was just making it up, since I just saw a still image of a man outside my window. He was thin and tall, and looked as if he had no facial features, kind of like that guy from Watchmen, Rorschach. Only there was no ink of the mask and it was the same shade as his pale skin. So anyway, I would talk to the man who I named the man without a face. I felt safe when I slept, knowing he watched me. Yeah, it was scary at first, but after a week, I figured he would never hurt me. So one day I was getting ready to go to bed. I thought I should talk to the man without a face that night, as per usual. It was raining, so I had to cup my hands around the cold window to see out into the dark night. He was there, in the same position, staring in on me only inches from the glass. "Hey, do you want to come inside?" I asked. "It's really cold out there." The figure slowly seemed to move its jaw, as if trying to speak. This spooked me. I pushed my ear to the window once the shock wore off. "Come again?" "Let me in." His voice was scary. It gave me chills and made the temperature feel like it dropped 10 degrees. I shook my head, telling the man no. I regretted extending the offer now. His hand hit the window with a thunderous boom. I jumped back and almost started crying. I didn't want him to come in, but he couldn't break the window. See, I lived in a very poor neighborhood, so my parents thought it would be a smart idea to buy bulletproof glass. I thank them for this to this day. After, the man without a face never showed up again. I heard a kid a few blocks down had died about a year later. His window was broken open, and he was killed. It was labeled a robbery gone wrong, but I know it wasn't. He was sitting by his window when they found him. It was the man without a face, and I think he is still out there. I lock my windows and sleep with a gun by my pillow now. I pray that's enough.